And Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. We got Eagles and Commanders. The Eagles with a win would wrap up the NFC East. It would be their second division title in the last 3 years, but nobody has won the NFC East back-to-back years. We're going 20 straight seasons with no repeat champion. It's either going to be the Eagles or the Commanders this year. It cannot be Dallas. It's going to be a long shot for Washington. For them to even think about it, they have to win the game this week against Philadelphia. How can they do that? Well, we'll break it down right now. Andrew DiCecco is here for this week's edition, or today's edition, of Football at 4. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, Mike. How are you, man?
Everything's great. We got an NFC East kind of a de facto, I don't want to say championship game, but if Philly wins, they will be the NFC East champions. What I want to start with is, how different are both these teams from the time they played a month ago?
Very much different. I just think that where the Eagles are, particularly that run-first team, but now they've tapped into their passing game element, which obviously was always there with the talent that they had, but it didn't look the same this season. It didn't make the eye test. It certainly wasn't to the level in which you saw against the Steelers with the last time the Eagles and Commanders met. So I think I'll be interested to see whether or not they try to flex their muscle a little bit in the passing game in this one. And then for Washington, they kind of cooled off a little bit because Jaden Daniels really took the league by storm, and he does have immense upside. I don't want to take that away, but it seems like they've lost a little bit of their allure. They're no longer the darlings of the NFL, and they showed some sort of cracks in the foundation, if you will. So I think that going to Washington, going to Landover, that's never going to be an easy task, especially that's one of the worst stadiums in the NFL. It's the playing surface isn't great, but and it will be tough because I think that their fans are rallying around that team. But the Eagles fans travel well as well, so I think that's going to be a game in which the Eagles should be able to continue to trend in the right direction and use that as a launching pad into the postseason.
You know, Andrew, you mentioned Daniels, and he was like the hot name early. That game against Philadelphia, some suggested that maybe that rib problem had been there. Has he kind of come back to earth? You know, when they had one pass to McLaurin for 10 yards in that game, and I'm just wondering, did the Eagles show teams something to kind of slow down the passing game that week?
I believe that they did. And look, he did some really good things, Jaden Daniels, earlier in the season. And a lot of that has to do with teams not necessarily knowing how to play him. He's a rookie, so they're trying to assess what he does well, what his comfort level is, and then try to play off that. But I think he ran into a buzzsaw of sorts when he played the Philadelphia Eagles, who they do have the best defense in the NFL. And that sort of altered the way that teams play Jalen Daniels, at least in my opinion. The Eagles, let's not forget, they did a really good job containing Daniels in the pocket and not letting him really escape without really having to have a QB spy. I thought linebackers Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean did a really good job in that area, Nolan Smith as well. And I think they really forced Jaden Daniels to kind of push the ball down the field and target his outside weapons, and he wasn't really able to do that. He didn't look comfortable. He had happy feet, and I think that sort of turned the tide for his rookie campaign.
Andrew, obviously all the noise last week. You were in the locker room after the game, and it was, it seemed like the team, at least Jalen Hurts, took a little bit of, he said, is that what you all wanted to see? A.J. Brown suggested, that kind of shuts everybody up here. What did you make of the offense in the game plan last week against in the win over Pittsburgh?
Well, I'm glad you asked. But to the first point of that, the question, so is that what y'all wanted to see? That kind of that was something that I didn't really care for too much because depending on how you take that, how you perceive those comments, it's like, yeah, everybody was talking about our passing game and we knew we could do this the whole time. But in reality, let's not kid ourselves here. If you look at that objectively, that passing game was nowhere near what it looked like last Sunday. Throughout the season, there were players that were open and Jalen wasn't hitting them. He wasn't throwing with anticipation. He was hesitant to throw the ball into tight windows or push it down the field. And he just seemed to have happy feet at times. But all of that was cast aside Sunday, and it looked like he used whatever perceived slights were out there, or that the chatter and the conversations that sort of dominated the week of preparation, and he almost used that as fuel. And whatever it takes, I guess, for the Philadelphia Eagles. But he takes that, and it almost makes him go out there and prove the doubters or the detractors, whether that's real or not, prove them wrong. And he went out there, he threw for 290 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he was attempting passes that he really hadn't even attempted all year. I can recall a back shoulder pass to A.J. Brown, for instance, and I thought he was a little bit more he was less risk-averse than he has been for most of the season. And almost went out there like he was trying to drop the mic and prove a point. And I think that he quieted a lot of the national audience, which they've been really vocal in the Eagles passing game, and Jalen Hurts in particular. So I can understand where that's coming from. But locally, I feel like Jalen Hurts has a lot of supporters here. They've seen him at his best. They know exactly what he's capable of when he was an MVP candidate in 2022. And the passing game, given the talent that the Eagles had, did not meet the eye test. But that all changed Sunday against Pittsburgh.
After the game, I want to get your take, too, because Nick Sirianni's another guy. He's kind of a lightning rod. Some never gave him a chance. Others viewed him from the beginning and judged him and aren't willing to change their opinions. Even though he keeps on winning, people still question. How was Nick's role, and how that week went and leading them to that win?
I think Nick Sirianni deserves a lot of credit. And if anyone had any question as to what does Nick do? They poke fun at his core values and his culture, etc. If you need any proof as to how his voice resonates and his ability to lead a football team and have them focus on the task at hand, look no further than how he handled last week, because no coach could have handled it any better than Nick Sirianni did. I thought he was masterful. He was intentional. He made sure that the focus was that game, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I just think that his ability to kind of have that emotional intelligence, relate to players, know how to diffuse situations, and bring teams together, bring a locker room together, that connection piece is a very real thing, and I've seen it all season long. There's a close-knit nature to this Eagles team, and I think that all stems from Nick Sirianni and his culture. But I say all that to say that you're not able to have the game that the Eagles had on Sunday without the preparation and detail enforced by Nick Sirianni. So it always never really quite sat well with me when I heard all off season and early in the season that Nick Sirianni, they were poking fun at him and this and that, but they were quick to call for his job in some cases after the Tampa Bay game. But all that stuff is unfounded. Nick Sirianni has a proven track record of winning, and how he's perceived internally is a stark contrast for how he's been perceived on the outside. And I think now it's really interesting to see a lot of folks come around and do a 180.
Andrew DiCecco, Football 4 here on a Thursday. We're looking at Commanders, Eagles this Sunday. You can listen to the game on 97.3 ESPN. 3 games left. How do you think this Saquon Barkley thing plays out? Do they go for it? The record, that is. Do they not care? I think they care about the record, but is the health more important? This is an interesting tap dance here.
Yeah, I think they certainly care about it. It's on their radar, but they're not going to put Saquon in harm's way and at the expense of, winning a game and preserving him for the postseason, because I think that's the ultimate goal. You can have the regular season record. Saquon said it yesterday, records are meant to be broken. So it's not something that's weighing too heavily on him. And, if he's able to get it, and it's not going to be an easy feat, well, they're going to give him every opportunity to do so. But if it's really, really evident that he's a far cry away from achieving Eric Dickerson's from eclipsing his record, well, then they're not going to put him out there. This is like their final true test Sunday against the Commanders, and then after that, I think it would serve the Eagles well to obviously play Saquon, start him, but maybe you're not playing him for the full amount of snaps that you have all season. Maybe you're working Kenny Gainwell and Bill Shipley into the equation and minimizing some of the wear and tear on Saquon. I think that would be the logical approach. And I think that would probably be the way the Eagles would lean, given how, the rest of the NFL and the landscape shakes out.
Andrew, you got A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Obviously they were a big part of the game last week. Is there more in this passing game? Was that just scratching the surface to you? He had 8 for 110, 11 targets last week. He's approaching 1,000 yards, and he missed a handful of games earlier in the season. So Brown, obviously, a big part of it. Smith was a big part. But do you see even more in this passing game?
I do. I think that sort of unlocked the full potential of the Eagles' offense. That game against Pittsburgh, the A.J. Brown saying passing, and then all of a sudden you're talking about a player in A.J. Brown who said, yeah, we had uncomfortable conversations that week. they didn't expand on that, nor should they. That's their business. But there were shortcomings on the offense, and it was solely down to the passing game. And I don't think you have to look any further than you don't have to have those type of difficult conversations if everything's hunky-dory. I think that they saw that there was an area of opportunity, and AJ saw it as, let me put this to the forefront so that we have time to fix it. We have 4 weeks to get it right so that we don't become one-dimensional in the postseason and we're not able to flip that switch or dust off the passing game. So I think that there's a lot more to achieve in the air attack, and A.J. Brown, I believe, Saquon Barkley even said it, he's the best player on the Philadelphia Eagles. He's instant offense. It shouldn't take a lot of effort to get him the football and allow him to do what he does after the catch. He's very physical. He's a 3-level threat. And that's sort of it was an awakening of sorts for A.J. Brown and that whole passing offense. I think there's a lot more they can achieve, and I think that that starts Sunday.
By the way, he said not only is he the best running back, he thinks he's the best player in the league. A.J. Brown said about Saquon Barkley, who, by the way, is average.
Saquon said that he believes that he said A.J. Brown's the best player on the team.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, because A.J. said, I don't think you're the best running back in the league. I think you're the best player in the league. So,
right.
obviously.
Yeah, AJ said, so there's a mutual respect there. And it was Brandon Graham's daughter who actually asked Saquon Barkley that question, and his answer was A.J. Brown.
Well, interesting enough, Saquon Barkley averages 136 yards from scrimmage against the Commanders in his career. It's the third most scrimmage yards per game by any player against any opponent in NFL history. Jim Brown, by the way, averaged 147 yards in 10 games minimum against Philadelphia. Jamal Lewis against Cleveland, and Saquon Barkley against Washington. So he dominates this game. So do we see them go back to the run game? What's the best way to attack Washington's defense?
Yeah, I certainly think that the Eagles are going to go back to the running game, but I do believe that they're not going to become so one-dimensional in this game because they know that they have to, and Jalen Hurts said this after the game, sharpen our tools and water our grass to make sure it stays green, alluding to the passing game and making sure that they're involving some of those, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, some of those, preeminent weapons that they have. And so I think it'll be a little bit more balanced than maybe something we've seen all season long, knowing that they're going to need both facets of the game to really, come January. So I think that you're going to see that on Sunday.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see. Last week it was 42 runs, 32 passes. They did have the ball a lot. They had a 20, Andrew, you ever see a 21-play drive to grind out a game in 10 minutes, 29 seconds? How impressive was watching that drive unfold?
The Eagles authored what I would qualify as the most impressive drive that I've probably ever seen. I don't think I've ever seen a 21-play drive cover 10 minutes plus. So, I mean, that's a masterful job by all parties involved. And the Eagles have had some long drives in the Nick Sirianni era, but to know that they have that on top of everything else, on top of the passing game, the run game, knowing that you can wear down a team and hold the ball for that amount of time, I mean, that's beyond impressive. And I think that makes the Eagles all the more imposing come January.
Andrew Gainwell, I want to get your thoughts on him. You wrote about him that he was not an afterthought. Some people during the broadcast suggested that Barkley was maybe nicked up or injured. And then, Sirianni, and something was obviously wrong with Barkley. He hinted after the game. Sirianni said, no, he's just our, 2-minute back. That's who we use. But you wrote about him not being an afterthought. And what I loved was, man, maybe this gives them just another weapon that they now say, you know what, we gave you a little bit more leash, and you proved that you can be a weapon.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Mike, because whenever I talk about all the Eagles' weapons, a player who I add into the equation is always Kenny Gainwell, because he is, at least in my estimation, the Eagles' most natural pass-catching running back, and a player who, if you ask anyone in that locker room, they're always going to be effusive in their praise for Kenny Gainwell. He works really hard. He's a tough runner. He's good in pass protection. He can catch the football. He's just a steady, reliable player, and I think every team needs a Kenny Gainwell. And he's not flashy. He's not a home run hitter. And it seems like every year folks are waiting for the next player to replace Kenny Gainwell in the pecking order. But the fact of the matter is that if Saquon Barkley wasn't here, and there's other opportunities that he's going to probably have as a free agent, he could start for a lot of teams. And to have that weapon, and I think and Saquon Barkley said that he tells him that all the time, that he could be a starter for a lot of teams in this league. Lane Johnson said the same thing. If he wasn't, if Saquon wasn't here, he would be a starter.
He's come a long way, I'll tell you, because, in years past, I felt like they were kind of trying to put a square peg through a round hole with him, and it just wasn't working. This year, he has really excelled in the opportunities he got. I thought last week he made a key third down, the spin move to get a first there. He had a couple big plays in that game, and I like the compliment that he is showing right now with Saquon Barkley. I want to get your thoughts. We are almost a full season through, and Quinyon Mitchell is now the favorite for Defensive Rookie of the Year. You saw him in the draft process. There was a decision to make there. The Eagles seemingly made the right decision. Arnold went to Detroit. Philadelphia ends up with Mitchell. Did you ever envision that he would be almost the key to unlock this defense's success?
No. I mean, I thought he would be good. If you remember, he was my top-rated corner in the draft, and I thought it was a home run that the Eagles were able to land him where they did late in the first round because I believe in his skill set. And you have to look beyond the Toledo label, which I thought was, an unfair ding when you're kind of assessing his play in the pre-draft process. But for him to be able to take to that position and play almost like a veteran out there, teams are now reluctant to even throw the football at his side of the field. In fact, they're more apt to target Darius Slay in coverage, as crazy as that may sound, than they are to challenge Quinyon Mitchell. And I think that really speaks to the level of respect and his ability to sort of erase one side of the field. Short memory. He's very confident. He's quiet, at least when he speaks to us as the media on the field. He's certainly very confident and self-assured. And I just think that all that together, he's just a steady player that I think just continues to ascend. But I don't think anyone could have foreseen him being able to take to what is probably the toughest position to play on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, you know what else is interesting? We were talking about this yesterday, and you can appreciate this. Howie Roseman had two decisions to make because there was a run on corners in the second round, too. Right after Cooper DeJean, there was like 3-4 of them in a row that went. Max Melton was one of them. There's a couple other ones right there, 1, 2, 3, 4. He picked the right one both times. That's not easy to do.
No, it's not. And by the way, Max Melton's having a really good rookie season as well in Arizona. But I think you have to give Howie Roseman a lot of credit for not being enamored with the Alabama tag. Now, look, Terrion Arnold, I like him a lot too, and I think he's also has a bright future. But the way that Quinyon Mitchell is wired, his preparation, his attention to detail, his technical aspect on the field where he's able to kind of break down receivers and he doesn't bail on his technique. I just think that's such a rare blend of attributes. And for him, like I said, this early in his career, to play almost like a veteran out there. And if you have the stats, we're probably talking about Defensive Rookie of the Year, and certainly Pro Bowl. But I just think what he's been able to do is just been tremendous. And when you look at what the Eagles were last season at the cornerback position to where they are now, I mean, what a stark contrast the year makes.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have been comparing this defense to the 2022 Super Bowl defense, and I don't know what to make of it. That team had Reddick. This team doesn't. You had Chauncey Gardner might have been better on that team than he is on this team. Bradbury was an all-pro player that year. Yeah. You had T.J. Edwards and Kaiser White. This team's got Bond and Dean. That team had better pass rush. This team might be better in the secondary. It is an interesting comparison.
Yeah, and Cooper DeJean, I think, is a big factor here when you're assessing that because his length, his athleticism, and his toughness at that nickel role. And let's not forget, Avonte Maddox has done so many good things over his career, and it's easy to forget that when you watch some of his plays this season where he's been a liability on the field. But he's been a really strong player in his career. But Cooper DeJean's otherworldly, and he's another player that's just scratching the surface of how good he can be. Blankenship has a lot more experience now. He was a rookie that season in 22, and Gardner Johnson, I think. A lot of these, I'm also factoring in that a lot of these players have gotten better with more reps and more years under their belt. And Nakobe Dean and Zach Bond, I would take over T.J. Edwards and Kaiser White.
Yeah, the other big guy is Jalen Carter was not on that team. Him and Fletcher Cox was on that team, had one of his better years. The one thing I wonder is if Fletcher played this year, how that would have impacted this defense if they had him this year.
Oh, yeah, Fletcher could still play. He clearly had plenty left in the tank. And he left on his own terms, which that's every player's goal.
Yep.
At the end of it. But I think that Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, they spoke about this at length during training camp when asked about their conditioning, when asked about how they were going to fill the void left by Fletcher Cox's retirement. And they said, look, and they spoke about all the different things they've done in terms of conditioning And it wasn't lost on them that a lot was going to be placed on their shoulders, knowing that Vic Fangio doesn't have a propensity to rotate defensive linemen. So a lot was going to be asked of them. They were going to have to take on larger roles, and they were going to become the face of that defense. And you can say it, and that sounds great at the podium or in a media scrum, but they're showing it. They're proving it on the field every week. I think both players deserve a lot of respect for that. And that all stems from Fletcher Cox being that veteran, being that player that's going to get in their ear during the season, when he was there, that holding them accountable and keeping them on their toes.
All right, Andrew, give me what you'll be watching for. What's the key for you for Philly to wrap up the NFC East? Washington's not going to go down easy. They're going to go kicking and screaming. This is a big one for them. And, by the way, they need this. If they lose this game, the Rams are hot tailing on their keisters right now. So how do you see this matchup in terms of what you're looking for?
Yeah, I like the Eagles in this game. And one thing I'll be watching, and they've really checked off that box every single week, is discipline. Are they able to remain disciplined, stay in their lanes against a quarterback who is fleet-footed like Jaden Daniels, contain them like they did in the first game? Because that, to me, if you're able to stay disciplined in a game where, it's easy to lose sight of that when you just had two big games you're coming off two big games, and you're looking, you're coming into this game. So it's easy to kind of lose sight and maybe have your attention to detail isn't what it normally would be. So I'll be looking at that every week. They've showed up ready to go, except for the Tampa Bay game. So I think that's the one area. And then if you want to look on the offensive side of the ball, can they continue the passing game in the fashion that they were able to kind of really take it to the Pittsburgh Steelers? Because that is a very key facet for the Eagles making a deep run in the postseason. And we know that it's there, but can they sustain that?
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, right here on the Sports Bash. Check him out, of course, over at InsideTheBirds.com. All of his Eagles coverage. We got 3 games left, and then hopefully a deep playoff run, which would culminate with me seeing you in New Orleans, my friend.
Oh, yeah. I'll be there. And, if it all comes to fruition, that's going to be a fun week of coverage and catching up.
Yeah, buddy, and happy holidays to you. Merry Christmas. I will be off next week when you are on here, so always appreciate still our conversations every week, and happy holidays, happy New Year, and I will talk to you in 2025.
Likewise, happy holidays, happy New Year to you, Josh, and all the great listeners. I appreciate it.